Shadows of the Enchanted Lake. This work of fiction is entirely a product of the imagination and does not draw from real events. In the depths of northern Maine, along the ragged shoreline of Enchanted Lake, a quiet town named Grey Haven lay nestled between dense, whispering forests and craggy cliffs buffeted by the bitter winds of an Atlantic winter. Over the course of several seasons, from the icy grip of winter to the balmy, deceptive freedoms of summer, Grey Haven would bear witness to nightmares that blurred the line between the living and the dead, a narrative as unpredictable as the swirling mists upon the lake. It was here that Emily Carter, a determined investigative journalist with a knack for unraveling mysteries, found herself drawn into a web of secrets so dark they threatened to shatter the fragile peace of the town. Emily arrived in Grey Haven on a bitter December morning. The town's narrow streets were lined with antique lampposts that flickered uncertainly against the encroaching dusk. She had been sent by her editor in Boston to investigate whispers of strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances, and encounters that defied logic. Everyone in Grey Haven knew that there was something amiss. The residents spoke in solemn tones of the cursed history of Enchanted Lake, a murmur passed down through generations. Even as Emily stepped off the bus, the chill in the air had an almost spectral quality, as if the cold itself were hiding secrets from unwilling witnesses. Her first encounter was with John Harrison, a local historian whose eyes held the weariness of one who has borne countless burdens. "You're not from around here, are you?" John asked in a gravelly voice as they met near an old, run-down general store on Water Street. "Grey Haven isn't a place for idle curiosity, Miss Carter. Many wonders here are best left undisturbed." Emily smiled politely, though the defiant glint in her eyes betrayed her determination. "I have always believed that the truth demands to be heard," she replied. The conversation bubbled over with tension, hinting at a lifetime of suppressed stories and specters that had haunted John long before her arrival. Days later, Emily roamed the streets seeking fragments of forgotten lore, her every step accompanied by the echo of stories whispered by generations. The local pub, dimly lit by fading chandeliers and framed by peeling wallpaper depicting old maritime scenes, was where she met Rebecca Blackwell. Rebecca, whose ancestry could be traced back to the town's earliest settlers, offered chilling details about the lake's legacy. "There are nights," she confided over a pint of bitter ale, "when the voices of those who died long ago call out from the water, luring the unwary to the depths. Many claim to have seen strange lights dancing across the lake's surface, a spectral ballet to mourn lost souls." Her voice trembled as she described events that defied rational explanation, and Emily felt the weight of the supernatural pressing in from every shadow and crevice of the aging inn. Even as winter began to lift and the first clear signs of spring appeared, Grey Haven's past refused to remain buried. Emily's investigation began to uncover a series of unsettling coincidences, inexplicable power outages coinciding with the full moon, cryptic symbols etched into ancient stones in the local cemetery, and the arrival of a mysterious stranger in town. His name was Andrew Finley, an enigmatic professor from Seattle with a penchant for the occult. His arrival was marked by an aura of despair and a cryptic note left at the front desk of the Grey Haven Inn. "Beware the curse that haunts Enchanted Lake," the note read, its penmanship trembling as if written by a haunted hand. As spring deepened, the thrum of life returned to Grey Haven, yet the supernatural presence only intensified. One balmy April evening, Emily joined Andrew for a walk along the lake's edge, where the air seemed to vibrate with secrets. "Do you believe in curses?" Andrew asked softly, his eyes scanning the rippling water. "I believe that some tragedies are so deep they bleed into the fabric of existence," he replied, his tone a mix of scholarly detachment and personal grief. The conversation was quickly interrupted by the distant echo of a child's laughter, airy and insubstantial, emanating from the dense timberlands beyond the lake. Both paused, listening, before cautiously continuing their conversation deeper into the mysteries that wrapped around the town like the entwined branches of its ancient trees. Summer gripped Grey Haven with a deceptive ease. The days were long and sunlit, the lake shimmering like liquid glass under the midday sun. Yet beneath the warm veneer, a lurking menace continued to manifest. Emily's investigation had led her to the dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town, a property long rumored to be cursed by the restless spirit of a scorned wife who had lost everything to betrayal and heartbreak. The mansion, known as Blackwell House, was home to disturbing relics, faded photographs, and diary entries that chronicled a series of tragic events stretching back well over a century. One sultry July afternoon, Emily found herself exploring the manor's decaying corridors. The peeling wallpaper bore the marks of time and neglect, and the dusty terracotta floors whispered underneath her cautious footsteps. In a room filled with antiquated furniture and portraits of somber-faced ancestors, she encountered a hidden journal. The diary belonged to Margaret Blackwell, whose bitter tale of infidelity and revenge had fueled the legends of the mansion. The entries spoke of ghostly apparitions, random acts of violence, and a mysterious phenomenon known only as the stirring, a moment when the boundary between the living and the dead dissolved into an all-consuming darkness. As Emily read aloud, her voice echoed in the empty room, and for a moment, she was certain she could sense a watchful presence lurking just beyond the threshold. Meanwhile, in the heart of town at a rustic diner on Maple Avenue, conversations swirled about the unexplainable. Locals debated whether the strange occurrences could be attributed solely to folklore or if they were manifestations of a malevolent force that defied understanding. In between sips of lukewarm coffee, an elderly man named Samuel narrated an incident from long ago. "It was a summer night much like this one," he began, leaning in conspiratorially, "when the lake turned black as pitch, and the spirit of a drowned child was seen wailing under the bridge. I'm telling you, those waters hold secrets you'd best not disturb." His words, spoken in a hushed tone, sent a ripple of unease throughout the room, seeding a fear that the town's idyllic present was built on a foundation of long-held torment. As the days edged toward autumn, the supernatural tapestry of Grey Haven grew even more intricate. The crisp air of early fall carried hints of approaching decay, both in nature and in the spirits that haunted the town. Emily's investigation led her to a long-forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of town, where tombstones were worn by time and nature's reclaiming fingers. Here she discovered a peculiar monument, a stone effigy depicting a sorrowful woman with eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Late one evening, under a harvest moon, Emily found herself standing before the monument as a dense fog rolled in from the lake. The silence was unnerving, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of dead leaves. Then, almost imperceptibly, a voice, a whisper, so soft it could have been the wind, called her name. "Emily," it breathed, sending a shudder through her core, as though the veil between life and death had thinned to nothingness. The ensuing days were a blur of haunted dreams and inexplicable visions. In the early morning hours, when the world was still cloaked in twilight, Emily was tormented by spectral apparitions, faces half hidden in darkness, reaching out from the recesses of her mind. In one vivid vision, she saw a gathering of the restless dead converging upon Enchanted Lake. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions a mixture of sorrow and wrath, as if accusing the living of forgetting them. Determined to understand the origin of these spectral gatherings, Emily returned to her notes, connecting disparate clues that pointed to a singular, tragic event, the mysterious drowning of a young girl named Lily, whose untimely death had long been shrouded in silence and scandal. Her quest for the truth led her once again to John Harrison, who reluctantly revealed details that he had long guarded. Lily was not just another victim of chance, John said during one of their clandestine meetings in the back room of the general store. Her death was intertwined with the legacy of the Blackwell family. The curse that besets Enchanted Lake began when a terrible injustice was done, a sin that demanded retribution through the very elements of nature themselves. His words hung heavy in the air, mingling with the scent of old paper and lost time. Emily listened, her mind racing to piece together the connections between Lily's untimely demise, the haunting occurrences at Blackwell House, and the unsettling omens that had begun to converge on every corner of Grey Haven. Andrew Finley became an unlikely ally in the journey deeper into the supernatural. His academic background in folklore lent credibility to the bizarre phenomena, and the two spent long nights poring over ancient texts and local lore. "There are forces at work here that defy our understanding," Andrew confided one humid August night as they sat in his cluttered study. The rituals of old, the sacrifices made in forgotten ceremonies, all these threads have woven together to create a tapestry of unrest. The lake, the mansion, the cemetery, they are all part of one grand design, a design that may finally be unraveling as the seasons change. His tone was apologetic, as though he were sharing secrets too dangerous for the light of day. Their research revealed that the supernatural disturbances were cyclical. With each season, a new chapter of terror was etched into the annals of Greyhaven's history. As the fiery colors of autumn spread across the landscape, the town braced itself for a final, terrifying crescendo. Shadows lengthened early, and a tangible gloom settled over Greyhaven. The lake, once a placid mirror reflecting autumn's vibrant palette, now churned with an undercurrent of restlessness. In a moment that seemed suspended in time, Emily found herself drawn back to the Blackwell house, which had become more decrepit with each passing day. The ancient mansion loomed in the twilight, its broken windows like the hollow eyes of a long-dead soul. Inside, the air was frigid and heavy, a stark contrast to the reddened decay outside. Each step echoed in the vast emptiness, and as she navigated the labyrinthine halls, she could almost hear the soft, endless sobbing of a woman whose pain had seeped into the very walls. In one particularly harrowing encounter, Emily came face to face with the supernatural. The sound of creaking floorboards led her to a hidden room, where the remnants of a life once lived were strewn across a time-worn table. A diary lay open on the desk, its pages filled with the anguished script of Margaret Blackwell. The entry described a fateful night when the vengeful spirit of a scorned lover was said to have possessed the very air around the mansion. "Tonight, I feel an evil beyond measure," Margaret had written, her handwriting trembling. "It is as if the past has come alive to claim its due, a reckoning for sins that cannot be forgiven." At that very moment, a spectral figure materialized at the doorway, a woman in a tattered gown, her eyes brimming with anger and sorrow. Emily's heart pounded as the apparition uttered a single word: "Remember," before vanishing as silently as she had appeared. In the days that followed, the boundary between reality and nightmare blurred further. Greyhaven became a crucible for the convergence of numerous haunted fates. A series of eerie coincidences unfolded: a sudden frost in the midst of a warm September evening, inexplicable shadows moving against the grain of the sunset, and the enigmatic appearances of figures that no one could explain. One evening, while wandering down one of the narrow lanes, Emily overheard a conversation between two locals outside an abandoned church near the lake. "I saw her again," whispered one man, his eyes haunted, "the lady in white. She's been roaming the marshes since Lily's drowning. They say she seeks vengeance for a past that refuses to be forgotten." The other man replied, his voice quivering, "And when she appears, nothing good follows. Mark my words, it's a bad omen." Their words, laden with unspoken dread, resonated with every fibre of Emily's being. In a desperate bid to piece together the fragmented truths, Emily arranged a secret meeting with Andrew in a secluded cabin near the lake, where the last vestiges of summer clung stubbornly to life. They sat by the dying embers of a fire, discussing the multitude of eerie patterns that had emerged. Every detail, Andrew mused, points to an ancient cycle of retribution. The disturbances we're witnessing now are merely a prelude to a larger, more devastating reckoning. Emily's eyes shone with determination as she replied, "We have to expose the past, no matter how painful it is. Only by understanding the origins of this curse can we hope to break its hold over Greyhaven." Their dialogue was punctuated by moments of silence heavy with implication, until suddenly, a loud knock at the door shattered the fragile calm of the night. When Emily opened it, she found a drenched stranger who claimed to have escaped from a nearby forest. His eyes were wide with terror as he stammered, "It's coming, the spirits, they're awakening." It was during this mid-autumn twilight that events escalated into a maelstrom of supernatural fury. The stranger, whose name was revealed to be Daniel Matthews, recounted his harrowing journey through the dark woods where he'd encountered apparitions and witnessed phenomena impossible to rationalize. The forest itself was alive, Daniel explained in a hushed tone as the wind howled outside, shaking the windows of the cabin. Every tree, every rock, seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. And I heard voices that spoke of ancient wrongs and a need for penance. They told me that if the curse of Enchanted Lake was not appeased, it would consume everything in its path. Even as Daniel's words sent chills down their spines, the heavy silence that followed was more damning than any explicit warning could have been. In the ensuing days, with winter looming once again on the horizon, the entire town of Greyhaven was gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread. The apparitions became bolder, manifesting in public places and interacting with the townsfolk in eerie, inexplicable ways. At the historic Greyhaven Library, a group of teenagers reported seeing a shadowy figure gliding silently between the stacks of ancient books, its form flickering like a flame in the dark. Rumors spread that the ghost of Lily and perhaps even that of Margaret Blackwell had joined forces with other malevolent entities, creating a storm of spectral terror that defied human intervention. As December crept back into the calendar, the natural world seemed to conspire with the darkness. Frost clung stubbornly to the ground, and a biting wind swept through the empty streets of Greyhaven like a harbinger of doom. Emily, now deeply embroiled in the mystery, decided to confront the heart of the curse head-on. With John Harrison, Andrew Finley, and even a reluctant Daniel Matthews by her side, she embarked on a final expedition to Enchanted Lake. Under a sky heavy with ominous clouds, they navigated a rickety wooden boat across the turbulent waters. The wind carried with it echoes of ancient lamentations, and the water itself appeared to churn with memories of forgotten agony. Midway across the lake, as the boat lurched violently, Emily's gaze was drawn to an isolated island shrouded in mist. It was said that on this island, the veil between the living and the dead was at its thinnest, a place where the spirits of the past could reach out and alter the present. "This is it," John whispered, gripping the sides of the boat as if preparing for the worst. The group disembarked onto the narrow, rocky shore, their hearts pounding in unison with the distant roar of thunder. Every instinct urged them to flee, but a compulsion greater than fear propelled them forward into the unknown. On the island, the spectral energy was palpable, a swirling nexus of sorrow and fury that seemed to coalesce around a centuries-old stone altar draped in moss and shadow. An ancient inscription, cryptic and foreboding, was etched into the stone, bearing the symbols of old gods long forgotten. Andrew ran his fingers over the carvings, whispering, "This is the heart of the curse. It is here that the tragic past must be acknowledged and reconciled if we are to break this cycle of torment." As a sudden gust of wind whipped about them, the altar shuddered as though stirred by unseen hands. In that moment, a chorus of voices rose from the very earth, echoing through the night in a cacophony of grief and rage. Amidst the clamor, Emily discerned a single, clear call, a plea for absolution that bore the unmistakable cadence of Lily's gentle voice, intermingled with the mournful lament of Margaret. The spectral voices enveloped the group in a suffocating embrace. Daniel's eyes widened in terror as he cried out, "The past is speaking. It wants us to remember." In response, the ground beneath them trembled, and swirling leaves rose like ghosts on the wind. For what felt like an eternity, time seemed to collapse upon itself as the voices reached a fevered pitch. Then, as abruptly as the chaos began, a profound silence fell. The presence receded, leaving behind a heavy emptiness that spoke of both relief and sorrow. Standing before the ancient altar, Emily felt a surge of understanding. The curse of Enchanted Lake was not merely a specter of vengeance, it was the tragic legacy of a community haunted by unresolved grief, a wound in the fabric of history that refused to heal. "We must honor those lost," she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "By acknowledging our shared pain, we can put their spirits to rest. Only when we accept the past, however sorrowful, can we hope to forge a future free of its dark influence." The group nodded in solemn agreement, and one by one, they placed small tokens, mementos of their own suffering and loss against the cold, weathered stone. In that cathartic moment, the oppressive grip of the curse loosened ever so slightly, as if the long-forgotten spirits had found a brief solace in being remembered. The days that followed were marked by a tentative return to normalcy in Greyhaven. Winter's chill gradually gave way to the tentative warmth of early spring. Yet the echoes of that fateful night on the island continued to reverberate in hushed conversations, in the lingering uncertainty of those who had witnessed it. Emily documented every detail with meticulous care, her pages filled with both empirical observation and the ineffable language of the supernatural. In quiet moments, as she sat at her desk in a small rented cottage overlooking the battered shoreline, she reflected on the nature of memory and the inexplicable bonds that tied the living to the dead. Even as the town began to heal, the shadows of its past remained ever present. In the gentle drizzle of early spring evenings, residents would sometimes catch fleeting glimpses of a figure standing at their windows, a woman in white, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope, silently urging them to remember. Conversations in Grey Haven grew to include legends of forgiveness and reconciliation, of a community coming to terms with its dark history. John Harrison organized meetings where the townsfolk could share their own stories of loss and love, and slowly, the narrative of curse and despair began to rival one of redemption and understanding. But even as hope blossomed, the supernatural was never truly vanquished. It lay dormant, like a sleeping beast, waiting for that moment when the weight of history would once again stir it from its slumber. On a humid summer night a year later, as the cicadas droned in the dark and the moon hung low in the sky, Emily found herself alone along the banks of Enchanted Lake. The water was eerily still, and in its placid surface she saw not only the reflection of the ancient trees, but the flicker of a face that resembled Margaret Blackwell. In a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, the voice said, "Remember, until the last tear is shed, our story continues." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the mysterious message dissolved into the night. It was a reminder that the supernatural, much like the human heart, was resilient and unpredictable, forever entwined with the cycles of nature and time. In the years that followed, Grey Haven slowly re-established itself as a place where the past and present coexisted in a delicate balance. The legacy of Enchanted Lake remained an indelible part of the town's identity, a reminder of both the destructive power and the healing potential of remembrance. Emily's articles, published in major newspapers from Boston to Seattle, captivated readers with their blend of hard-hitting journalism and lyrical accounts of the supernatural. Her work sparked debates among scholars, paranormal investigators, and psychologists who sought to understand the depths of collective memory and the power of myth in shaping community identity. One crisp autumn evening several years later, as amber leaves danced around cobblestone streets and the scent of wood smoke permeated the air, Emily returned to Grey Haven for one final visit. The town now seemed at peace, its residents weathered by time but united in their understanding of the past's impact on the present. In a quiet corner of the town's modest museum, a new exhibit had been unveiled, a tribute to the events that had once threatened to tear Grey Haven apart. Photographs, diary entries, and personal artifacts were displayed side by side with handwritten accounts of the supernatural events that had forever altered the town's fate. During a private viewing at the exhibit, Emily met with John Harrison one last time. "Our stories, our memories, they persist beyond our mortal coil," John remarked, his voice heavy with both wisdom and melancholy. "Perhaps it is not just a curse we must face, but a call to remember both the beauty and the sorrow of life." Emily smiled, feeling a profound connection to the resilient spirit of the community. "In remembering, we honor our past and forge a path toward healing. Every tear, every whisper in the wind, tells a story of who we are and who we might yet become." Their conversation lingered in the quiet halls of the museum, resonating with the timeless interplay between darkness and light. As the seasons changed once more, Grey Haven embraced a new chapter, a chapter written not in fear, but in acceptance. The supernatural legacy of Enchanted Lake, though never fully dispelled, was transformed into a symbol of the enduring human capacity for compassion and understanding. The town's residents learned that while ghosts of the past might always linger at the fringes of memory, it was their collective courage in confronting these phantoms that gave rise to true healing. And so, beneath a sky that promised both rain and renewal, Grey Haven stepped forward into a future where every shadow was embraced as part of a larger, intricately woven tapestry of life. In the end, the events of those turbulent years etched themselves into the very soul of Greyhaven, a reminder that the past, with all its mysteries and pains, was inextricably linked to the present. The enchanted powers of the lake, the restless spirits of old, and the indomitable will of those seeking truth had sparked a metamorphosis that would echo through the generations. Emily Carter, now a seasoned chronicler of life's darkest secrets, continued her journey with the knowledge that every mystery unraveled carried with it both loss and hope. And though the supernatural elements that had once besieged Greyhaven might return in time, the community had learned to stand together, united by their shared history, bound by their collective resilience, and ever vigilant in the face of the unknown. As I bring this tale of mystery, betrayal, redemption, and the inescapable pull of the past to a close, know that the story of Greyhaven is as much an echo of our collective memories as it is a cautionary tale of the forces that we are sometimes powerless to control. The enchanted lake, the spectral voices, and the restless souls that wandered its shores served as both a metaphor and a mirror, a reminder that in the darkness there is always a trace of light, urging us to remember, to forgive, and above all, to love despite the terrors that may lie hidden in the shadowed corners of our world. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to my channel, like the video, and check the description for details on how to support my work.